Olivia Bennett walked straight up to Daniel Carter's desk, planted both hands on the surface, and said, "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend this weekend. No feelings. No complications. Just the weekend." Daniel looked up from his screen. The entire open office went quiet. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just waited. And Daniel, a man who hadn't said yes to anything personal in 3 years, heard himself say, "Okay." But what neither of them could predict was that a hotel reservation mistake would shatter every rule they'd agreed to keep. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe. You won't want to miss where this goes. The morning it all started. Daniel Carter was already running on his 4th cup of coffee and his 3rd excuse for why he hadn't eaten breakfast. His desk sat near the window on the 14th floor of Meridian Group's downtown Chicago office. And every Monday felt the same stacks of project timelines. Emails from people who needed answers he hadn't finished finding yet. And the low hum of an open floor plan that somehow made everyone feel more alone than if they'd been working from home. He was 36 years old. He had a 9-year-old daughter named Lily, who made him homemade birthday cards with crayon drawings of dogs, even though they didn't own a dog. He drove a truck with a cracked rearview mirror he kept meaning to fix. He hadn't been on a date in 2 years. And he hadn't wanted to be. That was the version of Daniel Carter that existed before the Tuesday that changed everything. He was halfway through reviewing a budget proposal when he heard footsteps stop directly in front of his desk. He didn't look up immediately. He'd learned that if you looked up too fast in this office, someone handed you more work. But then a shadow fell across his screen. And something about the weight of the silence made him pause. He looked up. Olivia Bennett was standing at the edge of his desk with both hands flat on the surface, and her dark eyes locked on him with the kind of directness that made most people uncomfortable. She was 32. And she had a reputation in the office for being the person who could fix anything: a broken presentation, a derailed client meeting, a spreadsheet that had somehow turned into a disaster. She laughed loudly. She remembered everyone's coffee order. She sent emails that somehow managed to deliver bad news without making anyone feel attacked. But right now, she didn't look like she was fixing anything. She looked like she was about to do something that cost her something. "I need to ask you a favor," she said. Her voice was steady, but her jaw was tight. "And I need you to hear the whole thing before you say no." Daniel leaned back in his chair slowly. He set his pen down. "Okay," she exhaled. Then she said it. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend this weekend." The open office around them had the specific acoustic quality of a space where everyone is trying very hard to pretend they're not listening while absolutely listening. The keyboard clicks from the nearest row slowed almost imperceptibly. Someone's chair creaked. Daniel kept his expression neutral with the kind of practiced calm that came from years of delivering complicated news to clients without showing that he himself was 3 seconds from panic. "Say that again." "The company retreat," Olivia said. Her voice dropped just slightly. Not in embarrassment, but in the deliberate way of someone choosing their words precisely. "This weekend. Blue Ridge Mountain Resort. I need you to come as my partner." "I got that part." He folded his arms. "The pretend part is what I'm stuck on." "I know how it sounds." "How does it sound to you?" She held his gaze. "Like a terrible idea that I wouldn't be asking if I had any other option." That, somehow, was the most honest thing she could have said. Daniel glanced sideways at the rest of the office. Then back at her. "Sit down," he said quietly, "and tell me what's actually going on." Olivia pulled the empty chair from the side of his desk and sat down. She didn't look nervous. She looked resolved. There was a difference. Nervous was when you weren't sure you should do something. Resolved was when you'd already decided, and you were just waiting for the world to catch up. "Marcus is going to be there," she said. Daniel searched his memory. Marcus, your ex? 18 months ago. We were together for 2 years. She said it the way you'd read something off a fact sheet. We worked it out. We broke up. We stayed professional." She paused. "What I didn't know until last week is that he's been seeing someone. Someone from the Lakewood branch. and they'll both be at the retreat. Daniel nodded slowly. He was starting to understand the shape of this, even if he hadn't reached the edges yet. And you don't want to show up alone. I don't want to show up as the woman who got left behind, Olivia said. Her voice was flat and precise, because that's how he'll treat it. That's how people will look at me. And I am not. She stopped herself, took a breath, started again. I am not that woman. But if I walk into that retreat by myself, that's the story people will write in their heads. And by Sunday, I'll have heard 17 variations of "you look great." Are you doing okay in the voice people use when they're actually saying "poor thing"? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, she added. And there was something in her tone that was almost dry. Almost funny. But not quite. I'm asking you to stand next to me for 48 hours and act like you want to be there. Why me? He asked. She looked at him for a second longer than the question probably warranted. Because you're steady, she said. You don't get weird about things. You don't overcomplicate things. And you're not going to go tell everyone in the office about it afterward. You've thought about this. I've thought about little else for 6 days. He looked at his desk. His coffee, his budget proposal, the cracked edge of his phone case. He thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Because they worked together. Because fake anything had a way of becoming something else. Because he was a man who kept his life organized into neat compartments, and this was the kind of thing that blew compartments wide open. Then he looked back at her. What are the rules? He asked. Olivia blinked. Just one. He could see she had expected more resistance. Rules if I'm doing this? We need rules. What are we to each other? How long have we been together? How'd we meet? She sat up a little straighter, and just like that, the conversation shifted from a favor she was asking to a plan they were building together. 6 months, she said. We can say we started talking after the Henderson project last fall. That's plausible. We've worked together for 2 years, so nobody will question that we know each other well. What do we do for the hand-holding? He gestured vaguely. Normal couple things, she said. We don't have to be dramatic about it. Just convincing. Have you factored in that we work together? That if this goes sideways, it's not just awkward. It's a whole thing? I've factored in everything, she said. And I'm still asking you, which tells you how much I need this to work. Daniel looked at the wall behind her for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen and said, Send me the itinerary. Olivia sent him the itinerary. He read it twice. It was a 3-day, 2-night company retreat at the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort, luxury accommodations. Team building on Saturday morning, a formal dinner Saturday night, and checkout Sunday afternoon. 34 employees from their division, including their director, 3 team leads, 2 people Daniel genuinely liked, and apparently Marcus from accounting plus his new girlfriend from the Lakewood branch. Daniel read Marcus's name on the attendee list and felt something he couldn't quite name. Not jealousy, not protectiveness. Exactly. Something quieter. Something that sounded a lot like this woman is braver than she's letting on. They didn't talk much about it again at the office. Olivia was professional in the specific way that people are professional when they've compartmentalized something complicated and sealed the compartment for later. Daniel did the same. They passed each other in the hallway. They exchanged 1 or 2 neutral work-related emails. They acted, in other words, exactly like 2 people who had agreed to spend the weekend pretending to be in love. On Friday afternoon, they drove together. Olivia had suggested it. It would look strange if we arrived separately, and Daniel had agreed, because she was right. For the first 20 minutes, the car was quiet in the way that cars are quiet when 2 people are both trying to figure out how to be in a new space together. Daniel drove. Olivia had her phone in her lap but wasn't looking at it. Outside, the highway stretched out in both directions, and the city was already receding in the rearview mirror. You don't have to keep rehearsing, he said eventually. You can just talk to me. She looked at him sideways. What makes you think I'm rehearsing? You've clicked the same button on your phone about 11 times, and the screen hasn't turned on once. A short pause. Then, Almost despite herself, she laughed. It was a real laugh, quick and genuine. The kind that escapes before you can decide whether to let it out. I do that, she admitted. When I'm nervous. The phone thing. What are you nervous about? She thought about it. That I'll get there and forget how to be normal. Normal? Around him. Around all of them. She set the phone on her knee and looked out the window. Marcus used to have this way of making me feel like I was performing all the time, like I had to earn my place in every room we walked into together. And I know that's a me problem, as much as a him problem. But, she stopped. I haven't seen him since the breakup, and I don't know who I'm going to be when I do. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're going to be yourself. That's a simple answer. That's because it's a simple answer. You don't need a strategy for Marcus. You need to stop letting him have a strategy against you. Olivia turned her head and looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. That's surprisingly insightful for a man who just agreed to this plan 48 hours ago. I'm a project manager. I'm good at identifying what the actual problem is. She smiled slowly. It was a different smile than the ones she wore at the office. Those were warm and quick and designed to put other people at ease. This one was smaller and belonged entirely to her. And what's the actual problem? She asked. You already know you're going to be fine, he said. You just need someone standing next to you while you remember it. She was quiet after that, but the quiet was different. Lighter. Somehow. They drove another 20 miles before she asked, What about you? What about me? You said yes to this pretty fast for someone with a 9-year-old at home. She shifted in her seat to face him slightly. Who's watching Lily this weekend? My sister. She drives up from Springfield. Lily loves her more than she loves me anyway. So I stopped feeling guilty about it. That's not true. About my sister? Trust me, it's absolutely that Lily loves her more than you. Olivia said it plainly. Like it was obvious. I've heard you talk about that kid, she adores you. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Yeah. Well, he cleared his throat. She's the best thing I've got. There was something in the way he said it, not sad. Exactly. But weighted. The way things are weighted when they're held carefully. That made Olivia decide not to push. She just nodded and looked back at the road. A few miles later, she said, For the record, I know you're not doing this because it's easy. I know this is asking something of you. And I want you to know I don't take it lightly. He nodded once. Okay, no you don't, okay? She exhaled. Good. They drove the rest of the way through the foothills in a quiet that had shifted entirely. It wasn't the quiet of two strangers anymore. It was the quiet of two people who had started to recognize each other. The Blue Ridge Mountain Resort was the kind of place that showed up in architectural magazines with captions about rustic luxury and panoramic elevation. It sat nestled against the ridge, with exposed timber, stone fireplaces in every common room, and the specific kind of mountain air that made everything feel a little more significant than it actually was. The parking lot was half full when they arrived. A shuttle was unloading a group from the office. Daniel spotted 3 people from operations and their director, Glenn Harper, who wore the same fleece vest to every off-site event, regardless of temperature, as if it were a statement of personal identity. We're on, Olivia said quietly, not moving yet from the passenger seat. We're on, Daniel agreed. She didn't move. He didn't move. Then she said, Thank you. For real, she said it fast. Like she'd decided to say it before she could decide against it. You can thank me Sunday, he said. If it works. Practical. She grabbed her bag. I appreciate that. They got out together and walked toward the entrance, and Daniel, without thinking about it, without calculating it, put his hand at the small of her back as they pushed through the doors. Olivia didn't stiffen. She didn't look at him. She just walked, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And Daniel thought, this is either going to be fine or it's going to be the most complicated mistake I've made in years. He followed her through the doors. The lobby was warm and busy with the particular controlled chaos of a company event check-in. Someone had set up a welcome table with name tags and schedules and a sign that read Meridian Group Fall Retreat in a font that was trying very hard to say, both professional and fun simultaneously. Olivia smiled and picked up her name tag with the easy warmth of someone who was genuinely good with people. She handed Daniel his without hesitation, and he peeled the back and stuck it to his jacket with the efficient practicality of a man who had been to more than enough of these things. "You've got a system," she said, watching him. "I've been wearing name tags at events since I was 24, he said. "Upper left chest. Easy eye line. Never goes on the collar. Is there a wrong place? On the belt loop. I've seen it." The man spent the whole event having people glance at his hip every time they introduced themselves. She laughed that real laugh again, the one that had escaped in the car. And something about the fact that she laughed the same way here, in public, with people around, made something in Daniel's chest settle. This might actually work. Then he heard a voice behind them, Olivia. The laugh stopped. Not dramatically, just stopped. Daniel watched her shoulders do something complicated. They didn't drop. They didn't rise. They held, like someone bracing. And then they loosened again in the deliberate way of someone who had practiced not letting things show. It took about half a second. It would have been invisible to anyone not paying attention. Daniel was paying attention. She turned around, and Daniel turned with her, and there was Marcus. He was a man who looked exactly like what he probably thought he looked like, late 30s. Good haircut, the casual confidence of someone who had been told he was impressive often enough that he'd stopped questioning it. Standing beside him was a woman Daniel didn't know, dark-haired and pleasant-looking, who wore the expression of someone navigating someone else's history in real time. "Hey," Olivia said. Her voice was warm and completely neutral, in the specific way that reveals nothing and communicates everything. "Good drive down?" "Not bad," Marcus said. His eyes moved from her to Daniel with the particular speed of someone cataloging a surprise. "I didn't know you were bringing someone." "Didn't come up," Olivia said simply. Marcus extended his hand toward Daniel. Marcus Reeves. Daniel took it. Daniel Carter. He didn't add anything. He didn't need to. "You work with Olivia?" "We're on the same floor," Daniel said. "Project management." "You're in accounting?" "That's right." A pause. The hand let go. Marcus's eyes moved back to Olivia. And there was something in them, not cruelty, exactly. More like the quiet recalibration of a man who had arrived prepared for one dynamic and was now encountering another. "You look good," he said to her. "Thanks," she said. "So do you." She said it the same way she might compliment a conference room. Then she half turned toward Daniel in a way that was completely natural and said, "Should we check in? I want to put my bag down before the welcome session." "Yeah," he said. He let his hand find the small of her back again. "Let's go." They walked toward the front desk, without looking back. Olivia said nothing until they were in line. And then she said very quietly, "Nicely done." "You did most of it," he said. "I did not." "You neutralized him in about 6 sentences. She was quiet for a second. "Did it look okay?" "From outside." "From outside, it looked like you were talking to someone you used to know who turned out to be less interesting than you remembered." She pressed her lips together in the particular way of someone trying very hard not to smile. That's almost exactly how it felt. The front desk was staffed by a young woman with an efficient smile. She typed their names into the system, pulled up the reservation, and then her smile went through a very subtle micro-change, the kind where the customer service professional is doing instant internal calculations. "Mr. Carter and Ms. Bennett," she said, "I do have you here. And I'm so sorry to mention this." She glanced between them. "It appears there was a discrepancy in how your reservation was processed. We had you listed as a double room, 2 beds, but we had a system issue on our end. And the room that was blocked for your party." She clicked something on the computer, clicked something else. "We only have 1 room left available for your party that we can honor at the retreat rate." Olivia's expression didn't change. Daniel's expression didn't change. Behind the front desk woman, the key cards sat in their little paper envelope waiting, and the room, Daniel said, because someone had to say it. 1 bed a king. "Yes, sir." She looked genuinely apologetic. "I completely understand if that's..." "It's fine," Olivia said. Her voice was calm and clear and final. The front desk woman looked at Daniel. "It's fine," he confirmed. She handed them the key cards with the professional relief of someone who had braced for conflict and had not encountered it. "Enjoy your stay." They walked toward the elevator with their bags. Olivia said nothing. Daniel said nothing. They rode up 4 floors in silence, walked down the hallway, and stopped at the door. He held up the key card. The light clicked green. The door opened. It was a nice room. It was a very nice room. Actually, fireplace, balcony, mountain view, soft lighting. Someone at some point in history had put a lot of thought into making this room as romantic as possible. There was one large bed in the exact center of it. Daniel set his bag down by the wall. Olivia set hers down by the closet. Then she turned around and looked at the bed, and looked at him and said, with extraordinary composure, "This is not what I planned." "No," he agreed. "We can," she thought. "I'll sleep on the couch in the lobby. Or we can see if you are not sleeping in the lobby. Then we'll figure it out." She said it like a project that needed a solution, not a crisis that needed to be survived. "We're adults. We can share a room for 2 nights without it being anything." "Absolutely," he said. She nodded. He nodded. They both looked at the bed one more time. It was a very nice bed. Daniel picked his bag back up and moved it to the side of the room nearest the window. "I'll take this side." "I was going to say that side," she said. "Left side. I always sleep on the left. I've slept on the left for 9 years. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Fine," she said. "I'll take the right side." She pulled her bag to the other side of the room. "But the pillow situation is going to be discussed. I use 2 pillows, so do I." "How many pillows are on that bed?" They both counted. "There are 6 pillows on this bed," Olivia said flatly. "Then we each get 3. That math works," she said. And for the first time since the lobby, for the first time since Marcus had said her name and she had held her shoulders together by sheer force of will, Olivia laughed. Really laughed. And the room stopped being a complication. It became, in that moment, something else entirely, a place where 2 people who had each been carrying something alone for a long time looked at a ridiculous pile of pillows and laughed, like they'd known each other for years. Daniel watched her laugh and thought about responsibility, about the compartments he kept, about Lily drawing crayon dogs, about the last 3 years of making decisions alone in the dark and waking up and making more. He thought about how long it had been since anything had surprised him. Then he grabbed 2.5 pillows and said, "Welcome sessions in 20 minutes." "I know," she said, still smiling. "I sent you the itinerary." "You did," he said. "And you should know the font choice was alarming." "I didn't make the font choice. That was Glenn's assistant." Someone needs to have a word with Glenn's assistant about Comic Sans. She laughed again and grabbed her bag to change. And Daniel stepped out onto the balcony and looked at the mountains and breathed the cool air and felt, unexpectedly, like the next 48 hours might be the most alive he'd felt in years. He didn't know yet how right he was. He didn't know yet that by Sunday, the compartments would be gone. He didn't know yet that the woman on the other side of that door, the one who had walked up to his desk and said, "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend," like it was the bravest thing she'd ever done, was about to become the person he could know. Longer imagine pretending without. He just stood there and looked at the mountains and let himself, for the first time in a long time, not know what came next. The welcome session lasted exactly 90 minutes. And Daniel spent most of it watching Olivia work the room. That was the only word for it. Work. Not in the cynical sense. Not in the way of someone performing, but in the way of someone who was genuinely good at making people feel seen and had learned, somewhere along the way, to use that as armor. She laughed at the right moments. She asked the right questions. She touched Glenn's arm when he made a joke that wasn't quite funny enough to deserve the response she gave it. And Glenn stood up straighter for the rest of the evening because of it. Daniel watched all of this from across the room with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking and thought, she's been doing this her whole life, carrying other people, making rooms easier for everyone inside them, and then going home alone and carrying herself. Marcus was on the other side of the space with his girlfriend, whose name Daniel had learned was Andrea. She seemed pleasant. She also seemed like someone who had been briefed on Olivia and was doing her own version of watching the room, tracking a history she hadn't been part of. Daniel understood that impulse. He'd done it himself, in different rooms, for different reasons. The session ended, and the group moved toward the dining area for the first evening's dinner casual. The itinerary had said, which in corporate retreat language meant assigned seating that someone had spent 3 hours engineering to feel spontaneous. Daniel crossed his name card next to Olivia's and across from 2 people from the marketing team. A man named Phil, who talked about his boat with the specific enthusiasm of a man who needed everyone to know he had a boat. And a woman named Cora, who asked Olivia within the first 4 minutes how long she and Daniel had been together. Olivia didn't miss a beat. "About 6 months," she said, and reached over and put her hand on top of Daniel's on the table. "It kind of snuck up on us." Daniel turned his hand over so it held hers. It was the natural response. It was also, he noticed, genuinely comfortable in a way he hadn't expected. Cora beamed. Phil asked Daniel what he thought of the resort's dock access. The dinner moved. Wine was poured. Conversation layered and split and recombined the way it does at tables where people are colleagues before they are friends. Careful and warm in almost equal measure. At some point, Marcus and Andrea were seated 2 tables over, and Daniel noticed the precise moment when Marcus looked across the room and saw Olivia laughing at something Phil had said, and saw Daniel's arm along the back of her chair, and recalculated something behind his eyes. Daniel noted it and said nothing and poured Olivia more water because she'd been reaching for the pitcher herself. She looked at him sideways. Small. Unreadable to anyone else. He just nodded once. Barely the way you do with someone when you don't need words for it. She looked back at the table and kept talking. After dinner, the group dispersed into the common areas, the bar, the fireplace lounge. The evening had the loose structure of a company event once the official programming was over. People clustering by preference and history, the social gravity of shared offices doing its work. Daniel and Olivia ended up by the fireplace almost by accident. Or at least that was what it felt like until Daniel realized they'd both been steering toward the quietest corner of the room without discussing it. A coworker or 2 drifted through, said good night, moved on. And then they were alone in the warmth of it. 2 chairs angled toward each other, the fire doing what fires do in good rooms. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm good." She had her wine glass in one hand, elbow on the armrest. "Better than I expected, honestly." Marcus kept looking over. "I know." She said it without satisfaction. Without bitterness, just acknowledgement. "I could feel it. Does it bother you?" She thought about it for a real moment. Less than I thought it would. She turned the stem of the glass slowly between her fingers. "That's the thing about building something up in your head for 6 days. The actual thing is almost always smaller than the version you've been carrying." "Almost always," he said. "Almost." She looked at the fire. "He said something tonight. By the way, when you were getting the drinks." Daniel went still. "What did he say?" "He came over when I was alone for 30 seconds. She said it easily. But her jaw did that thing again. The tight thing. The held thing," he said. "I just want you to know I think it's great you're putting yourself out there." Like he was doing me a favor. Daniel looked at her steadily. "What did you say?" I told him I appreciated it, and excused myself. She took a sip of wine. "What I wanted to say was a lot less printable." "What did you want to say?" She looked at him, and the firelight was doing interesting things to the expression on her face, pulling out the parts that didn't usually surface in fluorescent office, lighting the sharpness. The humor, the thing underneath the warmth, that was something harder and more interesting. "I wanted to say, Marcus, the only thing I'm putting myself out there from is the last 2 years of make me feel like I had to audition to be loved." But that felt like more information than he deserved. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's true, though." She looked at him. "What you wanted to say. It's true." She held his eyes for a beat longer than the conversation required. Then she looked back at the fire. "Yeah," she said softly. "It is." They sat with that for a while. The way you can sit with something, when the person next to you isn't trying to fix it or wrap it up neatly, just willing to let it be what it is. Then Daniel said, "He made you feel like you had to audition all the time." She didn't hesitate. There was always something. My laugh was too loud in certain rooms. I was too direct in others. I should wear this. Not that. I should eat this. Not that. She stopped. Started again. He never said it cruelly. That's the thing. He said it like he was helping. Like he was the expert on how I could be a little more acceptable. And I was lucky he'd taken the time to consult. "That's worse," Daniel said. "Isn't it?" She glanced at him. "The cruel ones are easier. Actually. The cruel ones, you can point to the thing. You can say this specific thing was wrong. The ones who frame it as care," she shook her head, "those are the ones that get inside you. Those are the ones you spend a year after the breakup wondering if they were right." Daniel looked at his coffee cup. "Were they right?" "No." She said it with the certainty of someone who'd fought hard to get there. "No. But I believed it for a long time." He nodded. And then, because he had been thinking about it since the car, and the question felt suddenly possible, in the way questions only feel possible in certain kinds of quiet, he said, "My wife used to say I was too steady." Olivia turned her head. Not a compliment. The way she said it, he continued. She meant I was too contained, that I didn't let things in, that she never knew what I was feeling, because I'd solved it before she could see it. He paused. She wasn't wrong. "That sounds lonely," Olivia said. She didn't say it with pity. She said it the way you say something that is simply true. "It was," he said. "For her. Mostly. I didn't know how lonely until after." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "After she died?" "She got sick," he said. 2 years after Lily was born. It was fast. By the time they caught it. 14 months. He said, "The number the way you say a number, you've said enough times that it no longer breaks you every time. It just cost you something small. And the whole time, I was solving, making appointments, managing treatment plans, keeping Lily's routine stable, being steady." He exhaled. "She told me once, near the end, that she wished I would just sit with her and be scared. Not fix anything, just be scared with her." Olivia said nothing. "I couldn't do it," he said. "I didn't know how. Do you think you do now?" He considered that. The fire shifted. "I think I'm less afraid of it," he said. "That's as far as I've gotten." She looked at him for a long moment. Not studying him. Something more than that, receiving him. The way a person receives something they recognize. "That's further than you think," she said. Neither of them said anything for a while after that. And the quiet between them was the kind of quiet that has texture to it. That means something that you don't want to interrupt because it's doing something in the space that words would disturb. Then Olivia said, very quietly, "Thank you for telling me that. Thank you for the thing about the audition," he said. That was a good way to put it. She smiled. And it was the small private smile again. The one that was only hers. "We're both a mess," she said. "We're both working on it," he said. She lifted her wineglass an inch. "I'll drink to that." He lifted his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. They stayed by the fire until the room had mostly emptied, talking about small things and large things in the way that happens. Sometimes when the time of night and the warmth of a space and the specific quality of being seen by someone creates a temporary permission to say things you wouldn't say at noon. He told her about Lily's obsession with building elaborate cardboard cities in the living room and refusing to let him throw any of them away. She told him about the novel she'd been writing in her phone's notes app for 3 years that she'd never shown anyone. He told her about the truck with the cracked mirror. She told him about the lease she'd almost signed an apartment in Portland 3 years ago because she'd been so sure Chicago wasn't working. And then the Henderson project came in and she'd stayed, and the apartment had gone to someone else. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Staying?" She thought about it. "Tonight I'd say no." He smiled at that. It was a small smile. Something he'd been carefully not doing. And she caught it. "You should do that more often," she said. "What?" "Smile like you mean it." He looked at her. She looked back, and then it was late enough that propriety and good sense said it was time to go upstairs. And they both stood and gathered themselves and walked toward the elevator with the careful ease of people managing something that had grown larger than either of them had planned. In the elevator, they stood side by side, not touching. The doors closed. Olivia looked straight ahead at her reflection in the metal doors. Daniel did the same, she said. So, the bed situation. We discussed the bed situation, he said. 3 pillows each. You have the right side. I know what we discussed. She was still looking at the doors. I'm just making sure that this is still. It's fine, he said, gently, clearly. We can be 2 adults who had a real conversation by a fire, and also sleep in the same bed without it becoming a thing. Olivia, she breathed out, okay. Unless you want it to become a thing, he said. And then immediately said, that came out wrong. She turned her head and looked at him with an expression that started as surprise and became something amused. Did it? I didn't mean. Relax, she said. I know what you meant. The elevator opened. They walked down the hall. At the door, he used the key card again. The light clicked green. They walked in, and the room was exactly as they'd left it, the fireplace still warm. The mountain dark outside the balcony doors, the 6 pillows on the large bed, waiting with the particular patience of pillows that know they are about to be rearranged into a diplomatic boundary. He went to one side. She went to the other. They built the pillow arrangement with the mutual focus of 2 engineers on a minor project, and by the time they were done, it was almost funny, a small fortress of resort-grade cushions running down the center of the king mattress. This is extremely mature, Olivia said, standing back and looking at it. This is professional, he corrected. There's no difference at this point. He turned off the lamp on his side. She turned off hers. The fire was enough light. Just barely, soft and warm, and doing nothing to make the situation simpler. He lay on his back. She lay on her back. The pillow wall stood between them with great institutional dignity. Daniel, she said. After a moment. Yeah, today wasn't what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. More performance, more fake. She was quiet. This didn't feel fake. He stared at the ceiling. The fire moved. No, he said. It didn't. A pause. Is that a problem? She asked. He thought about the compartments, about the things he kept in order, about Lily's cardboard cities, which he also kept refusing to throw away, even though they took up half the living room, because he could not bring himself to be the person who threw away something someone had built with that much care. I don't know yet, he said. Okay, she said. That's honest. Yeah. Another pause. Good night. Daniel. Good night. Olivia. The fire went on burning. The mountains were outside the glass. The pillow wall held its ground. And 2 people who had started the day as co-workers lay in the particular dark of a room that was doing its best to be romantic. Both staring at the same ceiling, both thinking thoughts that had nothing to do with the plan and everything to do with the person 3 feet away. Sleep came eventually, slowly, the way it comes when something in you is still awake and paying attention, and not quite ready to let the day be over. And sometime in the very early hours of the morning, before the light changed, and before either of them would later admit to being aware of it, the pillow wall shifted, not collapsed, shifted. The way things shift when 2 people, even in sleep, move toward the thing that feels like warmth. Neither of them said a word about it. They woke up facing away from each other. Completely correct, completely professional. And the morning light came over the mountains, and through the balcony glass, and landed in that room where a fake relationship was becoming something neither of them had a word for. Yet, and where 2 people were learning, slow and careful and real, how to let someone in without losing themselves in the process. The alarm on Olivia's phone went off at 7. She reached over and silenced it. Daniel was already awake. He'd been awake for 20 minutes, which he did not mention. She sat up and ran a hand through her hair and looked at the pillow arrangement, which was no longer exactly where they'd left it, and said nothing about it with absolute precision. Then she looked over at him and said, Coffee first. Absolutely, he said. She grabbed her bag and disappeared into the bathroom, and Daniel sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the mountains and felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years, that he almost didn't recognize, that was quietly and persistently insisting on being acknowledged. He did not acknowledge it. He got up, got dressed, and went to the small room coffee maker. But it was there. It had been there since the fire, and it was not going anywhere. And some part of him, the part that had been solving everything alone for 3 years, the part that had packed lunches and managed timelines and kept the compartments sealed, knew it. Olivia came out of the bathroom in a dark green sweater and said, "Is that coffee or is it aspirational?" "It's coffee," he said. "Cream?" "Black," she said. He handed it to her. Their fingers touched on the cup for exactly 1 second. She looked at him over the rim as she drank. He poured his own and looked at the mountains. Downstairs, the retreat was starting. Glenn and his fleece vest and his team-building agenda were waiting. Marcus and Andrea were somewhere in the schedule. The disc had a structure and a plan and all the professional architecture of a company event. None of that was what Daniel was thinking about. He was thinking about a woman who had said she believed she had to audition to be loved. He was thinking about how no one who talked the way she talked, laughed the way she laughed, listened the way she listened, should have spent a single day of her life believing that. He was thinking that the next 36 hours were going to be the hardest thing he'd pretended through in years. Not because they were going to be difficult, because they weren't going to feel like pretending at all. And Daniel Carter, a man who had made his peace with alone, a man who had built his entire life around solving things and keeping things steady, stood in a hotel room in the Blue Ridge Mountains and looked at a woman drinking black coffee by the window and felt the thing in his chest knock. Quietly, one more time. He didn't solve it. For the first time in 3 years, he just let it be there. The team-building session started at 9 in the morning with the specific energy of people who had been told to have fun and were now managing the pressure of that instruction. Glenn had organized them into groups of 6 for a problem-solving exercise that involved a set of wooden blocks, a rope, and a laminated instruction sheet that no one could fully interpret. Daniel's group included Olivia, Phil from the boat conversations, Cora from dinner, and 2 people from the Lakewood branch whose names Daniel had collected and filed carefully because he was the kind of man who collected names. Marcus was in the group across the room. Daniel noticed without appearing to notice. It was a skill he had developed across years of managing rooms full of people with competing interests, and it had never felt more useful than it did right now. Olivia picked up the instruction sheet, read it once, and said, "Okay. The rope goes under the 3rd block." "Not over. Everyone's been reading it wrong." Phil blinked. "It says over. It says over the base, which means under the 3rd block from the base." "Read it again." Phil read it again. "Oh," he said. "Huh." Cora looked at Daniel. "Does she do this at the office?" "Every single day," he said. Olivia glanced at him over her shoulder with the small private look. The one that was theirs now, that had started by the fire and hadn't stopped. And then she went back to the blocks. Daniel watched her hands move with the same certainty she'd had at his desk 4 days ago, when she'd put both palms flat on the surface and said what she needed without apologizing for needing it. He thought, that's what courage looks like when it's been practiced so long. It looks like confidence. Their group finished the exercise first. Glenn looked pleased. Phil immediately began explaining to the group why the solution had been obvious once you understood the geometry, which was not how it had gone, but no one corrected him with any particular urgency, because Phil's boat was apparently very nice, and some social calculations are simply practical. During the break between activities, Daniel was getting water from the table along the wall when Marcus appeared beside him. Not by accident. There was nothing accidental about Marcus, Daniel had concluded. He was a man who moved with the precise intentionality of someone who had confused strategy with charm. "She seems happy," Marcus said. He poured himself a glass of water and looked across the room at Olivia, who was talking to Cora. His voice had the particular quality of a man producing a compliment that is actually a question. She is, Daniel said. You two have been together, what? 6 months? About that. Marcus nodded slowly. She never mentioned you. When we were together, she talked about everyone at the office. Daniel looked at him. People save certain things, he said. The things that matter. That landed where it was aimed. Marcus's jaw moved slightly, and he took a sip of water and said, She's a lot, you know. Olivia. She needs a lot. Daniel set his glass down and turned to face Marcus fully. Not aggressively. Just completely. She doesn't need a lot, he said. Very evenly. She gives a lot. There's a difference. And the person across from her either understands that, or they don't. Marcus said nothing. It sounds like you didn't, Daniel said. That's not her problem. He picked up his water glass and walked back across the room to Olivia. And she looked at him as he came and read something in his face that made her ask. Very quietly, what happened? Nothing, he said. Marcus was being Marcus. She studied him. What did you say to him? The truth, Daniel said. It was easy. It's all true. She looked at him for a moment with an expression that did something complicated. It opened. Briefly, the way a door opens when someone puts a key in the lock and turns it for the first time, in a long time. Just a crack, just enough to feel the air from the other side. Then it closed again. Careful, not cold, just careful. Don't do things on my behalf that I didn't ask you to do, she said. Understood, he said immediately. Do you want me to apologize to him? God. No, she said, and turned back to Cora. And Daniel stood there for a moment with what might have been a smile, and decided not to examine it. The morning session ended at 11:30. They had lunch together in the large dining room. And the conversation at the table was easier than dinner had been. The specific loosening that happens when people have done something mildly uncomfortable together and come out the other side. Phil's boat came up twice. The second time, Olivia asked a question about the engine that revealed she knew significantly more about boats than Phil did. And Phil's face went through 3 separate expressions in 4 seconds before settling on impressed. At 12:40, Olivia's phone buzzed. She looked at it. And Daniel saw her face change. Not collapse change. The specific shift of someone receiving information that was expected and unwelcome at the same time. She put the phone face down on the table. My mother, she said. To no one in particular. Everything okay? Cora asked. Fine, Olivia said. Same as always. She smiled and turned back to her lunch. And Daniel watched her eat 3 more bites with the focused efficiency of someone redirecting energy that needs somewhere to go. He did not ask. He waited. After lunch, when the group had septured toward the free afternoon block and they were walking back toward the elevator, he said, What did she say? Olivia exhaled. She wanted to know if I was at the retreat with anyone. And I said yes, and she said she stopped. Start again, she said. Just be careful, sweetheart. You tend to get your hopes up. She said it in a slightly different voice. Not mocking, just accurate. The exact inflection of a woman who had been hearing a specific thing for so long she'd absorbed the music of it. She means well. She always means well. She says that every time? He asked. Variation on the theme, Olivia said. The theme is, You're a lot, Olivia, and the world tends to give back a little less than what you bring. Manage your expectation accordingly. She pressed the elevator button. My mother has never once in her life managed her expectations accordingly. By the way, she's the most optimistic person I know. She just doesn't extend that to me for some reason. She paused. Or she does. And this is it. And she thinks warning me is the same as protecting me. The elevator opened. They got in. You're not a lot, Daniel said. She looked at him. You're the right amount, he said. You're exactly the right amount for the right person. She looked at him for 3 full seconds without saying anything. The elevator moved. The doors opened on their floor. You keep doing that, she said. Walking out. Doing what? Saying the thing. She walked down the hall. The thing that I didn't know, I needed someone to say until you say it. He walked beside her. Is that okay? She stopped at the door and looked at him. It's terrifying, she said honestly. But yes. He opened the door. She went in first. He followed. And the room was the same room it had been this morning. Same mountain outside the glass. Same bed with the pillow wall they'd quietly rebuilt before coming downstairs. But something about it felt different now. The way a place feels different when you've been outside in the cold and you come back and it's warm and it's yours. She sat on the edge of the bed her side and pulled her boots off. He sat in the chair by the window and looked at his phone. Not at anything, just at the screen, giving her the specific privacy of not being watched while she processed. After a moment, she said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Yeah." "When did you stop being scared all the time?" She looked at him. "After your wife. After all of it. When did it stop being just constant fear?" He put the phone down. He thought about the real answer, instead of the comfortable one. "It didn't stop," he said. "I got better at carrying it. There's a point where the fear becomes familiar enough that it's not in charge anymore. It's just there, part of the weight. You get strong enough to carry it and still move." She looked at her hands in her lap. "I'm scared all the time," she said. "Not of big things. Of small things. Of saying the wrong thing in a meeting. Of wearing the wrong thing to an event. Of taking up too much room. Of not being." She stopped. "Of never being enough." "I know," he said. "How do you carry it?" she asked. "What's the thing that works?" He thought about Lily. About cardboard cities. About the crayon dogs. About making lunches at 6 in the morning in a quiet kitchen with the radio on low. "You find the thing that's worth carrying it for," he said. "And you carry it for that thing. And then eventually you realize the fear was never as big as you made it." She was quiet for a long moment. "What's your thing?" she asked. "The thing you carry it for." "Lily," he said immediately. She nodded. "Yeah." A pause. "Is there anything else?" The room was very quiet. "I'm starting to think there might be," he said. She looked at him. And this time the door opened a little wider, and neither of them rushed to close it. They just stood on either side of it and let the air move through, and that was enough. That was exactly enough for right now. Then her phone buzzed again, and the moment shifted, and she looked at it and said, "The group is doing afternoon activities at 2. Some kind of hiking thing." "I'm aware," he said. "I read the itinerary. You're going to throw that back at me forever. The font choice alone justifies it indefinitely." She laughed. The door closed. Gently on its own, the way doors close when the right time has passed, and everyone knows there will be another time. "Okay," she said, and stood up and reached for her jacket. "Let's go be a couple for 2 more hours. We've been pretty good at it," he said. "We have," she agreed. And then, lightly, almost too lightly to catch, frighteningly good. He didn't respond to that. He just held the door open. She walked through. The hiking activity was optional, as all things labeled optional at company retreats are, which meant that opting out required a specific kind of social confidence that not everyone possessed. Daniel and Olivia opted in because neither of them was the kind of person who opted out of things, which was one of the 17 things they had in common that they hadn't yet formally cataloged. The trail was short and organized and moved through a wooded ridge with the specific managed beauty of a resort that has carefully curated its outdoor experience. Daniel stayed beside Olivia the whole time, not because they'd planned it. Because the group moved, and the two of them found the same pace without negotiating it. The way people do when their rhythms match. Marcus and Andrea were at the front of the group, Daniel noticed. He had been noticing Marcus all day with the particular vigilance of a man who had decided to know where a threat was at all times, even if the threat was less dangerous than anticipated. At the midpoint of the trail, there was a clearing with a view that someone, somewhere, had decided was the moment for the group to stop and appreciate, and they did. And Glenn said something about perspective that was genuinely nice and slightly corny, and everyone responded with the warmth it deserved. And Marcus, standing at the edge of the clearing, turned around and looked directly at Olivia, and then at Daniel, and then back at Olivia, and said, loud enough for the cluster of people nearby to hear, "So how did this happen exactly? You two?" The group didn't stop existing. The conversation around them didn't die. But the people within range shifted their attention the way people do when someone has just increased the social stakes by about 40% and everyone is waiting to see how it lands. Olivia tilted her head the smallest amount. "How does anything happen?" she said. "We worked together. We knew each other. It made sense. You never mentioned him." Marcus said. He stopped himself, recalibrated. "I mean, you talked about people at the office a lot. I don't remember the name. I don't remember talking about you to people at the office either," Olivia said pleasantly. "Some things you keep." It was what Daniel had said to him this morning. She'd turned it into a blade. Marcus looked at Daniel. "What is it you do again? Project management?" "That's right," Daniel said. "That's a lot of coordination, scheduling, making sure everything lines up." "It is," Daniel said. "You develop a sense for things that don't belong in a plan." He held Marcus's eyes. "Pretty quickly. Usually, the beat that followed was approximately 3 seconds long and contained roughly 90 seconds worth of communication. Cora, bless her, chose that moment to ask Glenn a question about the view. And the group's attention drifted, and Marcus turned back toward the trail. And Andrea put her hand on his arm, the way you put your hand on someone's arm when you are reminding them, gently, where they are. Olivia said nothing. She looked at the view. After a moment, she said, quietly enough that only he could hear, "You know, if we were actually together, that would have been very attractive." "If?" he said. She looked at him sideways. "You know what I mean." "I do," he said, "but I liked the if being in question." She turned back to the view, and he could not see her face from where he was standing. He didn't need to. He could hear it in the half-second before she answered. The sound of a person deciding something, not committing to it. Just deciding that the door they'd been standing beside all day was probably worth opening the rest of the way when the time was right. "Noted," she said. They walked back down the trail in the loose formation of the group. And the afternoon light was going gold, the way afternoon light does in mountain country. And Daniel thought about compartments again, but differently this time. Not about keeping them sealed, about what you find when you open them. About what's been in there waiting, that you convinced yourself wasn't important. The formal dinner that evening was the centerpiece of the retreat. Dressy, but not formal. The itinerary had said, which Olivia had interpreted with a burgundy dress that Daniel had not been prepared for when she came out of the bathroom, and he had managed, through approximately 9 years of practicing steadiness, to say simply, "You look great," and mean it in 8 different ways. "You don't look terrible yourself," she said, which was also in approximately 8 different registers. And they'd gone downstairs. The dinner was long and good and loud, with the specific warmth of people who had spent 2 days together and were now on the pleasant side of familiarity. Toasts and jokes and stories from the field. Daniel sat beside Olivia and felt, increasingly, that the arm he kept resting along the back of her chair had stopped being a performance somewhere around the salad course and was now simply where his arm wanted to be. She leaned back into it slightly during dessert. He wasn't sure she noticed. He was very sure he did. Then Glenn stood up at the head of the table and said, "Before we wrap up, I want to say it's been a great year. A great team, and this weekend has been a good reminder that the people next to you matter." He raised his glass. "To the people next to you." Everyone raised their glasses. Daniel raised his. Olivia raised hers. And she glanced at him sideways as she did. And there was something in her eyes that was private and clear and direct. Something that was not performing anything for anyone. Not Marcus, not the table, not the retreat. Something that was just for him. He held her gaze. She looked away first, but slowly. Glenn finished his toast and people clapped, and the dinner began breaking up into the loose drift of the final evening, and it was then, in the movement and the noise, that Marcus crossed the room with the specific purposefulness of a man who had been building up to somethings all day, and had stalan AV in front of Olivia. Daniel was right beside her, but Marcus addressed her like he wasn't there. "Can I just say something? While I've got the chance." Olivia looked at him steadily. "Sure. Marcus, I think." He paused, recalibrated. I think I handled things badly at the end. Between us, I wasn't as careful as I should have been. And I said things I don't know if I fully meant, and I think you deserved better than that." The room moved around them. No one was paying attention, and everyone was paying attention. The way crowds work. Olivia was quiet for a moment, completely still. Then she said, "I appreciate that." "I mean it," Marcus said. "I've thought about it." "I know you mean it," she said. And her voice was not cold. It was not warm. It was the voice of someone who has arrived somewhere that cost them something and intends to stay. "And I've thought about it too. A lot. Actually. And what I've come to is it wasn't just how you handled the end, Marcus. It was the whole thing. The way you made me feel like I had to be edited to be acceptable. The way I let you. I spent 6 months after we broke up, wondering which parts of myself I should change. And the answer I eventually got to is none of them. None of them needed changing. They were fine." Marcus opened his mouth. She kept going. Not loudly. Not dramatically. With the terrible quiet certainty of someone who has done the work. "I don't need an apology to feel okay about where I ended up. I'm good. I am genuinely, actually good. And I hope you're good too. I mean that." She met his eyes. "I also need you to know that the way you looked at me when we arrived yesterday, that look that said you were deciding whether what I had was real, I noticed it. And I need you to know that it doesn't matter. It is not the referendum I used to let it be." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in his face that might have been respect, or loss, or recognition, or all three happening at the same time. "Okay," he said. "I hear you." "Good," she said simply. He looked at Daniel once. Just once. Something in it that was almost like acknowledgement. And then he walked back across the room to Andrea. And Olivia exhaled once, slow and deliberate, like someone setting down something heavy after a very long walk. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "That was the most controlled piece of honesty I've ever witnessed in person." She looked at her wine glass. "I've been practicing that in my head for approximately 18 months. "It showed," he said. "In the best way." She laughed. And this time the laugh had tears in it, not sad ones. The kind that come when something you've been holding finally releases. When the body decides the crisis is over and starts returning to itself. She blinked twice and pressed the back of her finger to the corner of one eye and said, "Don't you dare acknowledge those." "What tears?" he said. "Exactly," she said. He put his hand on her back and she leaned into it, and he thought, "There it is. There is the thing I've been not calling it all day. And it is large and it is quiet and it is entirely sure of itself. The way the most important things always are." The evening wound down and the group dispersed to the bar. The lounge, the elevators, the particular comfortable endings of a night that has been genuinely good. Daniel and Olivia rode up in the elevator with Phil, who talked about the dinner rolls for 3 floors, and then got off. And then they were alone again, in the box of the elevator, shoulder to shoulder, and she said, without looking at him, "I'm glad you were here." "I'm glad I came," he said. The doors opened. They walked to the room, the key card, the green light, the door. Inside, the fire had been restoked by housekeeping at some point in the evening, and the room was warm and quiet and completely, irreducibly itself. Olivia took off her heels by the door and stood in her bare feet on the carpet and said, "I need to tell you something." He stopped, turned. "Okay. This stopped being fake for me sometime this morning," she said. She said it directly. Eyes on him, no performance. No qualifier, just the sentence. Laid out there like something she'd decided had earned the right to be said. "I don't know if that changes anything. I don't know what you're thinking. But I'm not going to stand here pretending I'm only doing you a favor anymore. Because I'm not. And I would rather say it, and have it be awkward than not say it, and spend the drive home wondering." The fire moved. The mountains were outside. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. And then he said, "It stopped being fake for me somewhere in the car." She blinked. "The car." "On the way down," he said, "when you laughed the first time. The real laugh." She was very still. "That was before we even got here." "Yes," he said. "So you spent the entire weekend Trying to figure out what to do with it, he said. Yeah. She looked at him. He looked at her. And the distance between them, which had been managed all weekend with the careful architecture of people respecting boundaries they'd agreed to, was no longer being managed by either of them, and they both knew it. What do you want to do with it? She asked. He crossed the room. Not fast, not dramatically. The way you move towards something you've decided on, with the full weight of the decision in every step. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head up slightly to hold his eyes. I'd like to stop pretending, he said, if that's okay with you. She reached up and put one hand flat against his chest, not pushing, holding, feeling, and said, Daniel, it's been okay with me since the car. And then he kissed her, slow and certain and true, the way he did everything when he'd made up his mind. And she kissed him back the way someone kisses someone when they've been waiting for something without knowing exactly what it was. And it turns out it was this. Exactly this. The shape and the weight and the rightness of this person. When it ended, they stood there for a moment. Her hand still on his chest, his forehead against hers. Both of them breathing. Okay, she said softly. Okay, he said. So the fake part is officially over, she said. The fake part, he said, was over before it started. She laughed, and it was the real laugh. The one that escaped before she could decide. And he thought, I am going to spend a considerable amount of my remaining time on this earth, making sure I keep hearing that laugh. He didn't say that. He just stood there in the warm room with the fire and the mountains and the woman who had walked up to his desk and asked for the bravest thing she'd ever asked for. And he felt the last compartment, the last sealed, careful, quiet compartment, open. And he let it. They didn't talk about what it meant that night. They didn't need to. Some things are large enough that naming them immediately would only make them smaller. And both Daniel and Olivia were people who understood instinctively that the best way to protect something new and real was to let it breathe before you tried to define it. They went to sleep on their respective sides of the bed, the pillow wall still technically in place. Though no one would have called it a barrier anymore, it was more like a habit, a comfortable joke between two people who no longer needed it, but hadn't quite gotten around to acknowledging that fact out loud. Olivia fell asleep first. Daniel knew because her breathing changed, slow and even, and the tension she carried in her shoulders even when she was still finally released. And he lay there in the dark, listening to the mountain, quiet and thinking about the word real. Real was what he'd stopped expecting 3 years ago. Real was what he'd told himself he didn't need, didn't have room for, couldn't risk for Lily's sake or his own. Real was the thing he'd sealed in the last compartment and told himself was fine there. That it was responsible, that it was the right kind of sacrifice for a man in his situation. Real had apparently had other plans. He fell asleep somewhere around 2 in the morning and slept better than he had in months, which he did not examine and absolutely noticed. Sunday morning arrived without drama. The light came through the balcony glass at 7:15, and Daniel was awake at 7:12, which was how he always worked, his body deciding things before his alarm did. He lay still for a moment before moving, listening to the room, to the fire that had burned down to almost nothing overnight, to Olivia's breathing, which was still slow and even and closer than last night. The pillow wall had migrated again. It was now entirely on his side of the bed, stacked against the headboard, which meant at some point in the night, Olivia had been using his shoulder as a pillow, and his shoulder had, apparently, accepted the assignment without waking him. Or it had, and he just hadn't minded. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the pillow situation. He looked at the ceiling again. Olivia stirred, lifted her head, looked at the pillow situation. Looked at him. Those moved, she said. They did, he confirmed. A pause. I'm a restless sleeper, she said. I know, he said. You mentioned it, did I? No, he said. But it tracks. She dropped her head back down for exactly 5 more seconds, then pushed herself up and sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hands through her hair. He sat up too. The room was Sunday morning quiet. The specific quiet of the last day of something. When you can feel the shape of it ending, and you're not sure whether to rush toward the ending or hold still and let it own you. We check out at noon, she said. I know. The drive back is about 2 hours. I know that too. She looked at him over her shoulder. I'm not sure what Monday looks like, she said. At the office. I haven't figured out that part. We don't have to figure it out this morning, he said. I'm a planner, she said. Not knowing what Monday looks like is uncomfortable. Monday looks like two people who know something true about each other, he said. That's a better starting point than most Mondays. She turned further toward him. One knee pulled up on the bed, looking at him with the early morning directness of someone who hasn't yet assembled their public face. She was more herself at 8 in the morning than at any other time. He'd already decided. No performance, no warmth deployed as shield. Just her, direct and clear and a little wary and entirely real. Are you sure about this? She asked. Because I need you to be sure. I can't do the thing where something starts, and then the person realizes they've made a complicated situation and decides the complications aren't worth it. I'm sure, he said. Daniel. Olivia. He looked at her steadily. I spent 3 years not being sure about anything that wasn't Lily or work. I know the difference between sure and sure. I'm sure. She held his eyes for a long moment, searching them the way she'd searched his face in the lobby when Marcus had said her name. Except this time she wasn't stealing herself. She was checking. Then she nodded. One small, decisive nod. Okay, she said. Okay. She got up and went to the bathroom, and he exhaled slowly and thought about Monday, and thought about the drive home, and thought about all the things that were true, that hadn't been true 3 days ago. And none of them scared him the way he'd expected. They had breakfast downstairs with the rest of the group. The last meal of the retreat. The one where people are already half checked out mentally and conversations have the loose, warm quality of goodbyes assembling themselves. Phil talked about his boat one final time. Cora hugged Olivia and said they had to get lunch sometime. And Olivia agreed with the genuine warmth of someone who actually intended to follow through. Marcus was at the far end of the table. He caught Daniel's eye once, across the room, and did something with his jaw that was the closest Marcus would probably ever get to an acknowledgement. And Daniel looked at it and looked away and decided it was enough. At 10:45, Daniel went upstairs to pack. Olivia stayed to say goodbye to a few more people, the way she always did, collecting the room on her way out of it. He was zipping his bag when he heard the door open. He turned, expecting Olivia. It wasn't Olivia. It was Marcus. Daniel straightened. He didn't say anything. He just waited. Because he was a man who had learned that the most powerful move in a tense room was stillness. Marcus stepped inside. He didn't come far. He stood near the door, hands in his jacket pockets, with the look of a man who had been rehearsing something and was now deciding in real time whether to use it. I'm not here to cause anything, Marcus said. Okay, Daniel said. I just want to say, he stopped. Tried again. She's better than when we were together. She's easier in herself. I wanted you to know I see that. Daniel was quiet for a moment. That's good of you to say. I wasn't good to her, Marcus said. It cost him something. That sentence. Daniel could hear it. I wasn't. I didn't know how to be what she needed. And instead of being honest about that, I made her feel like what she needed was wrong. He looked at the floor. I told myself I was being helpful, realistic. I wasn't. No, Daniel said. You weren't. Marcus looked up. Something in his eyes said he'd expected pushback or comfort, and got neither. Just the plain agreement. And that it was worse somehow. Take care of her, he said. She doesn't always take care of herself. She does better than she thinks, Daniel said. She just needs someone to stand next to her while she remembers it. Something in Marcus's face changed. Whether he recognized the echo of what Olivia had said, or whether it just landed differently now, Daniel couldn't tell. Yeah, Marcus said. Maybe. He looked at Daniel for another beat. Then nodded once, turned around and left. Daniel stood there for a moment after the door closed. He picked up his bag. He looked at the room, one more time the bed, the window, the fireplace, the 6 pillows distributed across both sides, without any wall between them anymore, and he felt something settle in him. Final and clean, the way things feel when a decision stops being a decision and becomes just the truth of your life. He went downstairs. Olivia was in the lobby with her bag, talking to Glenn, who was wearing the fleece vest and looking pleased with himself in the way of a man whose retreat had gone well. She was laughing at something Glenn had said, the real laugh, the one Daniel now considered partly his in the most non-possessive sense of the word, the one that escaped before it was invited. She saw Daniel coming across the lobby, and her face did the thing, the small thing, the private thing that was only for him. Glenn said something else, and she responded, and then she moved toward the door, and Daniel fell into step beside her. And that was it. That was all it took. Just the two of them moving in the same direction, at the same pace, like they'd been doing it for years. In the parking lot, she said, "What took you so long upstairs?" "Marcus came to say goodbye," he said. She stopped walking. "What? Not like that," he said. It was actually fine. He said some things that were difficult for him to say, and he said them anyway." He looked at her. "He's not a villain. He's just someone who didn't know how to be what you needed and made it your fault. That's common and it's wrong, but it's not the same as evil." She was quiet for a moment. "What did he say?" "That you're better now than when you were together." Her face moved. Something behind her eyes. "That's not nothing," she said softly. "No," he said. "It's not." They reached the truck. He put both bags in the back. She got in the passenger seat and put on her seatbelt and picked up her phone and clicked the dark screen 3 times before she put it down in her lap. And he saw it and said nothing and got in and started the engine. They drove the first stretch in the easy quiet that had replaced all the earlier quiet, the one that felt like home rather than territory to be navigated. Then Olivia said, "I need to tell you something about me. Something I haven't told a lot of people." He kept his eyes on the road. "Okay, I've spent most of my adult life being the person who makes things work for other people," she said. "The one who fixes the presentation, smooths the meeting, remembers the coffee orders. And I'm good at it. I genuinely like it. But I've been so focused on making things work for other people that I've never really asked someone to make something work for me." She paused. "Asking you on Thursday was the first time I've done that in years. Maybe ever." He drove. "Let that land. And the thing that scares me," she continued, "isn't that it might not work. It's that it might. And then I'll have let someone in all the way, and I won't know how to protect myself if it changes." He was quiet for a long moment. "You protect yourself by choosing the right person," he said. "Not by staying outside. Is that what you did?" "No," he said. "It's what I should have done and didn't. And it cost me 3 years of being alone when I didn't have to be." She turned her head and looked at him. He felt it even without looking. "I'm not going to change my mind," he said. "That's not who I am. I decide things slowly, and then I don't undecide them. You've watched me work for 2 years. I know that," she said. "Then trust it," he said. "Not me specifically. Trust the thing you already know." Another mile went by. "Lily," she said suddenly. He glanced at her. "What about her?" "I want to be careful," she said. "About Lily. I don't want to be someone who just walks into a 9-year-old's life and takes up space. I want to earn it. If she ever gets to." She stopped herself. "I'm getting ahead of things a little," he said. But he was almost smiling. "But for the record, Lily asked me last week who the woman was in the photo on my phone, and I may have mentioned your name." Olivia went very still. "You have a photo of me on your phone?" "From the Henderson Project wrap dinner," he said. "You were laughing." "It was a good photo, Daniel." She said his name the way you say someone's name when you've just learned something about them that reorganizes several things at once. "That was 8 months ago." "Yes," he said. "You've had a photo of me for 8 months. The lighting was good," he said. "The lighting," she repeated. "And you were laughing." She looked at him for a long time. He kept his eyes on the road with great discipline. "You are the least complicated person I have ever met," she said finally. "I'll take it," he said. She laughed. The real one. Escaped before she invited it. And Daniel let himself, Briefly, completely, feel the full size of the thing he'd spent the weekend pretending wasn't growing. And it was large and warm and certain. And it had a photo in a phone from 8 months ago. And it had been patient in the way that real things are patient. Without knowing it was waiting, just being there, just ready. They stopped for gas outside a small town around the halfway mark. Olivia went inside for coffee while he filled the tank. He watched her through the window, moving through the small store, speaking to the cashier, laughing about something. She laughed about everything. That was the thing. She found the small funny thing in every interaction and offered it back to the other person like a gift. She came out with 2 cups and a paper bag. "I got you a muffin," she said, handing it through the window. "Blueberry. You strike me as a blueberry person." "Why?" he asked. "Reliable," she said. "Classic. Doesn't need to be flashy to be good." She got in. "I'm a lemon poppy seed person. Myself. Unpredictable," he said. "Interesting," she corrected. "There's a difference." He bit into the muffin. It was, in fact, exactly what he would have chosen. He said nothing about this, and she knew it anyway, and they drove on. At the 90-minute mark, Olivia said, "I want to tell you what happened with Marcus. The real version, not the summary." "You don't have to," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I want to." So she told him, not the compressed version she'd given him in the car on the way down, but the full version, with the specific moments and the specific sentences that had accumulated over 2 years into a weight she'd carried out of that relationship and into the next year and a half, like it was hers to carry. The night he'd suggested she might want to think about the way she dressed at his work events. The morning, he'd said, over breakfast, that she sometimes came on too strong in social situations. Which was an observation he'd framed as something a friend would say. The birthday dinner, where he'd made a joke in front of his friends about her appetite, and then, when she'd gone quiet for the rest of the evening, said she was being too sensitive. None of it was dramatic. That was the thing she kept coming back to. None of it was a scene. None of it was a moment she could point to and say, "There, that's the one. That's when I should have left." It was all small and incremental and delivered in the voice of someone who cared about her. And the accumulation of it was a woman who had stopped trusting her own judgment about herself by the time the relationship ended. Daniel listened to all of it without interrupting. He drove, and he listened, and he let her have the full space of telling it. And when she finished, he said, "Thank you for telling me that. I needed to," she said. "Before Monday, before whatever this is becomes anything, I needed you to know where I'm coming from." "I know where you're coming from," he said. "I'm going to need patience," she said. "I'm going to second-guess things. I'm going to have days where I'm convinced you're about to recalibrate, and I'm going to need you to be steady." "I'm very good at steady," he said. "I know." She looked at him. "That's why I asked you." He glanced at her. "What was that? 3 days ago, you said." "You're steady," she said. "You don't overcomplicate things. That's why I asked you to do this." She held his gaze for a moment. "But that's not the whole reason. What's the rest?" "I trusted you," she said simply. "I've worked next to you for 2 years, and I've watched you handle everything hard clients. Impossible timelines, Glenn's Comic Sans, without losing your composure or your kindness. And I thought, if there's one person who won't make this harder than it already is, it's him." She paused. "And I was right. But I didn't expect the rest of it." "The rest of it," he said. "The fire," she said. "The car. The thing you said about carrying the fear. The photo in your phone that you've had for 8 months." He was quiet. "I didn't expect to come back from this weekend different," she said. "I thought I was coming back relieved. I thought I was coming back having handled Marcus and moved on, and the rest would be fine." She looked at the road. "I didn't know I'd come back." She stopped, found the word open. He felt the word land in his chest. Open. That was the word. That was what had happened to him, too. The compartments not just unlocked, but standing ajar. Light coming in from all directions, the future looking different in every room. "I didn't know either," he said. They were 40 minutes from Chicago. The city was starting to appear in the distance. The particular way it assembles itself on the horizon, building by building, already organizing itself back into the ordinary. I'm going to pick up Lily at 4, he said. My sister brings her back at 4. Okay, she said. She's going to ask about the trip, he said. She asks about everything. She's 9, which means she asks 600 questions about every topic, and then stores every answer and brings it up 4 days later when you've forgotten you said it. Olivia smiled. She sounds like a lot. She's the best thing I've ever done, he said. It was the same thing he'd said in the car on Friday. And it landed the same way, with that weight in it. That careful weight of something held, because it matters more than everything else. I know, Olivia said, and I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere near that until it's right. It'll be right, he said. Not immediately. But it'll be right, he paused. She already knows your name. So, because of the photo, Olivia was quiet then. Quietly, what did she say? When you told her my name. He kept his eyes on the road. He let a moment go by. Then he said, She said, is she nice? And I said yes. And she said, Good. You should only be friends with nice people. Daddy. Olivia made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry, and was entirely human and entirely real. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth for a second. She's 9, she said. When she could. 9 going on 43, he said. She laughed through whatever the sound had been. He reached over without thinking about it and put his hand on hers. And she turned her hand over and held it, and they drove the last 30 miles to Chicago like that. His hand in hers. The city coming up around them, the weekend becoming the past, and the future becoming something neither of them had a word for, yet but both of them could feel. Specific and warm and already familiar. Already certain. He pulled up in front of her building at 2:47. They sat for a moment with the engine running. Monday, she said. Monday, he said. It's going to be strange, she said. The office. The office has survived stranger, he said. Phil told 3 different people about his boat this weekend, and everyone is just going to go back to working with Phil. She laughed. That's not the same. No, he agreed. It's better. She looked at him. Is this the part where I get out of the truck and we pretend for 48 hours that everything is normal? Or he said, this is the part where you get out of the truck and we both know that Monday is going to be the first day of something. And we don't have to pretend anything. She held that for a moment. I like that version better. Me too, he said. She opened the door and got out, and he got out the other side and got her bag from the back and handed it to her in the particular concrete way of someone who does things, because doing them is how he shows things. And she took it, and their hands were close, and she said, Daniel, yeah, dinner, she said. Not the retreat, not the company. Just dinner. This week. Wednesday, he said. Wednesday, she agreed. And then she kissed him. Brief and sure, right there in front of her building in the Sunday afternoon of a city that had no idea that a weekend had just reshaped 2 lives inside it. She pulled back and picked up her bag and walked toward her building. And at the door she turned around once and looked at him standing by his truck on the sidewalk. The muffin thing, she called back. You haven't said anything about the muffin thing. What muffin thing? He said. That it was exactly right, she said. I could tell. He looked at her. She looked at him. It was exactly right, he said. She smiled, the real one, the private one, and went inside. He stood on the sidewalk for another 30 seconds. The city moved around him the way cities move. Indifferent and enormous and full of ordinary Sundays happening in every direction. He stood in the middle of all of it and felt the size of what had just reorganized itself inside him. The particular largeness of something that had been small and sealed and was now entirely open and asking to be filled. He got in the truck. He drove toward the house where Lily would be home at 4, full of questions and drawings of dogs they didn't own, and the pure demanding love of a 9-year-old who had decided that the only people worth keeping were the nice ones. He drove, and he thought about Wednesday, and he thought about Olivia's face at the door, looking back at him, and he thought, this is what it feels like to not have managed yourself out of something real. The cracked mirror on the truck showed the city behind him, getting smaller. He drove through it without looking back. He had things ahead of him now. That was new. That was entirely, unexpectedly, exactly new. And when he pulled into the driveway of his house and turned off the engine and sat for one quiet moment before going inside, he did something he hadn't done in 3 years, without effort, without forcing it, without it costing him anything at all. He smiled, like he meant it. Lily was sitting on the front steps when Daniel pulled into the driveway, which meant she'd been watching for the truck from the window and had run outside the moment she heard the engine. This was how she operated. She didn't wait for things to come to her. She went to meet them. She was 9 years old, and she had her mother's eyes and Daniel's stubbornness and a personality that had somehow synthesized both into something entirely her own. Something bright and direct and completely unintimidated by the world. She launched herself off the second step before he'd fully turned off the engine and hit him at approximately 4 miles per hour somewhere around the midsection. He caught her the way he always caught her. Both arms, all the way. None of it managed or calculated. Just the pure automatic response of a body that had been catching this particular person for 9 years and knew exactly how much she weighed and exactly how much force she carried. "You were gone for 3 days, she said into his jacket. 2 nights, he said. 3 days, she insisted. I counted. He hugged her tighter. Over her head, he could see his sister Carol standing in the doorway with a coffee mug and an expression that said she had questions she was politely saving for later. Carol was 40. Practical, direct, and the second best person Daniel knew at reading a room. She would have questions about the weekend. She would wait until Lily was in bed to ask them. And then she would ask them with the precision of someone who had spent 2 days, noticing that her brother had texted differently than usual on Friday night. He carried Lily inside without putting her down, which she accepted with the dignified satisfaction of a child who knows she's too old for this and intends to take it anyway. Carol handed him a coffee. "Good trip," she said. "Good trip," he said. She looked at his face. He looked at his coffee. She said nothing further, which meant she was saving it all. Lily wiggled down from his arms and stood in front of him with her hands on her hips. "What did you bring me? What makes you think I brought you something? You always feel guilty when you leave, so you always bring something." He looked at Carol. Carol looked at her coffee. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced out a small stone he'd picked up on the trail. "Saturday afternoon. Smooth and gray and slightly remarkable," and held it out. Lily took it and turned it over in both hands, with the complete seriousness she brought to all objects. "It's a rock," she said. "It's from the Blue Ridge Mountains," he said. "Hundreds of millions of years old." She looked at it again. The math of that registered somewhere behind her eyes, and the rock was immediately more interesting. "How do they know?" "Scientists measure them," he said. "They can tell by what's inside." She closed her hand around it. "I'm keeping this," she said, with the authority of someone who had made a decision that was not open for revision. "I counted on it," he said. She ran upstairs to add it to her collection, and Carol looked at Daniel over the rim of her mug and said, quietly, "You look different." "I look exactly the same," he said. "Daniel." She said his name the way Olivia said his name, which was the way people said your name when they wanted you to stop using words to avoid the thing. "You texted me at 11:30 on Friday night to ask if Lily was asleep, and then you said, and I'm quoting, 'Good. I just wanted to make sure she was good.' You have never in 9 years texted me to make sure she was good when you knew she was with me. You always know she's good with me." He drank his coffee. "So," Carol said. "There's a woman," he said. Carol's face moved through several things quickly. Surprise, though not full surprise. Relief, though she disguised it as casualness. And something underneath both that was softer, that he didn't look at directly because it was close to the thing they didn't talk about. The 3-year absence of certain conversations. "The coworker?" she said. He looked up. "How do you?" "Lily told me you had a photo of a woman on your phone from work," Carol said. She described the photo for approximately 7 minutes. He put the coffee down. "I need a lock on my phone. You need a lot of things, Carol said. Not unkindly, just accurately. Is it serious? He thought about the pillow wall, the fire, the drive home, the muffin, Wednesday. It's new, he said. But yeah, it's serious. Carol was quiet for a moment, then she said, Good. Just that. Good. The way you say something when it's the only right word and every other word would make it smaller. Yeah, he said. She left at 5. Lily made him sit through 40 minutes of a documentary about ocean creatures, during which she asked approximately 60 questions and answered half of them herself before he could speak. He sat on the couch with her, leaned against him, and thought about Olivia, saying she wanted to earn this, wanted to be careful with it, wanted to take it slow and do it right. He thought she would be good at this. He thought Lily would make her work for it, and that Olivia would not back down from that. Because Olivia did not back down from things. She just figured out where the rope went and then moved with absolute certainty. At bath time, he told Lily he'd had a good trip. Did you make a friend? She asked. She asked this about every situation. A good trip. A work meeting. A trip to the hardware store. Did you make a friend? I think so, he said. A real one. She considered this while squeezing excessive amounts of shampoo onto her head. Is it the woman in the photo? Yeah, he said. Is she coming over? Not for a while, he said. But maybe eventually. Does she like dogs? I don't know, he said. I haven't asked. You should ask, Lily said, with the gravity of someone issuing strategic advice. That's important. I'll put it on the list, he said. Monday arrived the way Mondays always do. Indifferent to what happened over the weekend, requiring the same things it always required. Daniel was at his desk by 8:15. Coffee at his left hand, his project board pulled up on the screen. The familiar architecture of the working week assembling itself around him. Olivia's desk was across the floor, diagonal from his, close enough that he could see her without appearing to look, and far enough that looking required intention. He knew this because he had always known it and had never previously thought about why. She arrived at 8:43. He didn't look up from his screen. She didn't look over at him. They were so professional. They were so professional that Cora, who sat between them, felt nothing unusual at all. Which was the entire point. At 9:15 his email pinged. From Olivia Bennett. Subject line, Henderson follow-up. Body Wednesday. There's a place on Maple I've been meaning to try. Also, good morning. He looked at the screen. He looked at the floor plan. He looked back at the screen. He typed, good morning, 7 p.m. works. What kind of place? 3 minutes later. The kind with actual tablecloths and no televisions on the walls. You'll survive. He typed, I've eaten at places with tablecloths before. Her reply came in 11 seconds. The photo in your phone suggests you're a man who eats at his desk 4 days out of 5. He looked up from the screen. Across the floor. Without looking at him, Olivia Bennett was typing something to someone else, with the focused calm of a woman who had definitely not just sent that message. He looked back at his screen and typed, You're going to be difficult, aren't you? The reply took 30 seconds. I'm going to be exactly the right amount. He put his phone face down on the desk. He was smiling at his project board, and he knew it, and he did not particularly care. Tuesday passed. Wednesday arrived. He picked her up at 6:50 because he was constantly incapable of being late to things, and she was outside her building when he pulled up, which meant she had been watching for him, the way Lily watched for the truck. And he noticed this and said nothing about it, and filed it in the same place he filed the muffin and the photo and the way her hand had felt in his on the drive home. The restaurant was the kind Olivia had described. Quiet and warm and serious about its food, with actual tablecloths and candles that weren't performing romance, but happened to create it anyway. They sat across from each other and ordered and talked the way they'd been talking since Friday. Easily and without gaps. Conversation moving between the serious and the small, the way it does with people who have already passed the point of pretending to be more or less than they are. She told him about her week. A presentation that had gone sideways and then come back together in the last 10 minutes because she'd reframed the opening. A phone call with her mother that had surprised her by being genuinely good. A scene in the novel in her phone's notes app that she'd finally written the way she'd wanted it for 2 years. He told her about Lily and the rock, about Carol and her questions, about the conversation, about the photo on his phone that had apparently been circulating in his household since before the retreat. Olivia held her fork still over her plate. She described the photo for 7 minutes. Carol's words, he said. What did she describe? I didn't ask for details, he said. I thought it was better not to know. Wise, she said. She ate a bite of something then. She asked if I like dogs. He looked up. I told her I didn't know yet. I love dogs, Olivia said. I've wanted one for 3 years and I haven't gotten one, because my building has a weight limit, and the dogs I love are not the dogs that fit the weight limit. What kind do you love? The enormous kind, she said. The ones that take up the whole couch and look at you like you're the entire world. He thought about Lily's crayon drawings of dogs they didn't own. He thought about the cardboard cities in the living room. He thought about a house that already had room for large and had been waiting to be reminded of it. He said nothing about any of this because it was Wednesday, and it was the first dinner, and some things needed to unfold at their own pace. But he thought it. He let himself think it. That was new. At 9:15, walking back to the truck, she took his hand without announcing it. Just reached over and put her hand in his, the way she had on the drive home. And he held it the same way, and they walked half a block in the city dark before she said, I want to tell you what the novel is about. You said you hadn't shown it to anyone, he said. I said I hadn't, she agreed. I'm telling, not showing. There's a difference. Okay, he said. It's about a woman who spends her whole life being the person in the room who makes things easier for everyone else, she said. And one day she stops. Not dramatically. She doesn't have a breakdown or a revelation. She just stops. And then she has to figure out who she is when she's not performing the function. She paused, and it's harder than she expected, because the function had become the identity. And without it, she doesn't know what she wants or what she's allowed to want. They walked. His hand held hers. Does she figure it out? He said. She's working on it, Olivia said. Is the novel working on it? He said. Or are you working on it? She looked at him sideways. Both, she said. That's kind of the point. He nodded. He did not try to solve it. He just held her hand and walked with her through the evening and let the thing be what it was, which was a woman who had spent a long time making herself smaller, trying to remember the full size of herself, and a man who had spent a long time making himself sealed, trying to remember what open felt like. 2 people, both working on it, both willing to work on it beside each other. That was, he thought, more than enough to start. The weeks that followed built themselves the way real things build, not in dramatic gestures, but in accumulated ordinary moments that quietly become the structure of a life. Wednesday dinners became the anchor of the week. Saturday mornings he started calling her before Lily woke up. 10 or 15 minutes of low conversation over coffee. Her voice still morning rue, his mind already running the day's logistics. Both of them finding the same quiet they'd found by the fire. She met Carol on a Thursday evening in late October when Daniel had a parent-teacher conference and his usual backup was unavailable. He called Olivia, not because she was the obvious solution, but because she was the person he wanted to call. And she said yes before he finished asking. Carol opened the door, looked at Olivia, looked at Daniel, and said, I'll put more water on, which was Carol's version of a standing ovation. Olivia sat at the kitchen table with Carol for 45 minutes while Daniel was at the school. When he came back, they were talking about the kind of things women talk about when they've decided within the first 10 minutes to trust each other. He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, coat still on, and watched his sister laugh at something, Olivia said, and thought, this is what it looks like when the life you built carefully for 3 years starts to become the life you actually wanted to be living. He didn't say that either. He just took his coat off and joined them. Lily met Olivia on a Saturday in November. which Daniel had planned with the precision of a man who understood that this was the most important project he had ever managed and that the margin for error was zero. He had told Lily a week in advance. Not everything, just that a friend was coming for lunch. A good friend. Someone he worked with. Lily had asked 3 questions in rapid succession. Is it the woman in the photo? Does she like dogs? And can we have grilled cheese? He had answered yes. Yes, actually she does. And yes. Lily had processed this information and then said, okay, with great finality, as if she had weighed the evidence and reached a verdict, and the verdict was in Olivia's favor pending in-person confirmation. Olivia arrived at 11:30. She knocked on the door, which Daniel opened, and she stood on the doorstep with a paper bag in one hand, and the particular look of someone who was not quite afraid, but was paying very close attention to everything. Hi, he said. Hi, she said. From behind him, at roughly the level of his elbow, came a voice. Are you the woman from the photo? Olivia looked down. Lily was standing at Daniel's side with her arms crossed. Not hostilely, just with the evaluating energy of someone conducting an assessment. I think so, Olivia said. Was it a good photo? Lily considered. You were laughing, she said. Daddy said the lighting was good. It was, Olivia agreed. I was having a nice time. Lily tilted her head. What's in the bag? Lemon poppy seed muffins, Olivia said. From the place on Elm, do you know it? Lily's entire evaluation shifted. Those are my favorite, she said. With the weight of someone receiving unexpected evidence in favor of the defendant, she looked at her father. She brought the good muffins. She knows about muffins, Daniel confirmed. Lily stepped back from the door. You can come in, she said, with great magnanimity. But if you sit in the blue chair. That's my reading chair, and you have to ask, noted, Olivia said. I'll ask. She came inside. She did not sit in the blue chair. She sat at the kitchen table and helped Lily arrange the muffins on a plate with the serious attention to presentations that Lily brought to all tasks. And Daniel stood at the counter and made coffee and watched the 2 most important women in his radius decide, in real time, over muffins to like each other. It wasn't instant. Lily was 9, and she was thorough, and she asked Olivia 9 questions over lunch, including what her job was, whether she thought cats or dogs were better, what her opinion was on pineapple on pizza, and what the saddest book she'd ever read was. Olivia answered every question directly, without performing for the child or talking down to her, just answering the way she answered everything, with the full weight of her attention and an honesty that didn't soften itself unnecessarily. On the pineapple question she said, controversial, but yes, and I'll defend it. Lily looked at Daniel. I also say yes, she said. Dad says no. He's wrong, Olivia said. He's wrong about a lot of things, Lily said confidentially. I'm sitting right here, Daniel said. Neither of them looked at him. At 2 in the afternoon, Lily took Olivia upstairs to see the cardboard cities. This was not a small thing. Lily did not show the cardboard cities to people. They had been under construction for 3 years, and they were elaborate and specific and entirely hers, and she guarded them with the creative ferocity of an artist who had not yet decided whether the world deserved access to her work. Daniel stayed. Downstairs, he washed the lunch dishes and listened to the sound of Lily explaining something at length from the floor above, and Olivia's voice responding, and then Lily laughing. The real one, the escaped one, the one that ran in the family apparently. They came back downstairs at 3. Lily talking non-stop about the infrastructure of the largest city, which had a working drawbridge made from a cereal box and a rubber band. When Olivia left at 4, she hugged Daniel at the door and said quietly, over his shoulder, She's extraordinary. I know, he said. She showed me the cities. She said, I heard, he said. She told me no one gets to see the cities, she said. That's true, he said. She pulled back and looked at him. She said, I could come back and help with the waterfront district. He looked at her. She looked at him. She said that? He said. She said she needed a second opinion on the bridge placement, Olivia said, and that I seemed like someone who would take it seriously. He felt something move in his chest, large and quiet and entirely sure of itself. She's right, he said. You do. Olivia pressed her hand flat against his chest. The same gesture she'd made the night in the hotel room, when the fake part officially ended. And he felt it through his shirt like something warm and certain and entirely his. Wednesday, she said. Wednesday, he confirmed. She left. He closed the door. Lily was at the top of the stairs looking down at him. She's nice, Lily said. She is, he said. Is she your girlfriend? He looked up at his daughter, 9 years old, direct as a compass needle. Yeah, he said. She is. Lily processed this. Does she know about the dog thing? We've discussed it, he said. We should get a big one, Lily said. We've also discussed that, he said. Lily looked satisfied and went back to her room. And Daniel stood at the bottom of the stairs in the quiet of the house and thought about all the compartments he'd kept for 3 years and how every single one of them was open now, and the world had not ended. It had expanded, it had made room, and the room was warm. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in February, Daniel drove to the Blue Ridge Mountain Resort. He had not told Olivia where they were going. He'd said, "Dress warm. There's a drive. Bring coffee." She'd appeared at his door at 8 in the morning with 2 cups and the lemon poppy seed muffins and looked at him with specific patient curiosity of a woman who trusted the plan even when she didn't know what the plan was. He drove. She rode. The city disappeared behind them, and the hills appeared, and then the mountains, and she looked at the road, and then at him and said, "Daniel, yeah, are we going where I think we're going?" "Probably," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Why? He drove. He thought about how to say it. He was better at saying things now than he'd been 6 months ago. The sealed places had been open long enough that they'd learned to speak. "Because it's where it started," he said, "and I want to go back to where it started, now that I know how it ends." She turned her head and looked at him with the full weight of her attention. The way she looked at things that mattered, complete and undefended. "How does it end?" she said. He kept his eyes on the road. "It doesn't," he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the mountains were coming up the way they did, unhurried and enormous and completely indifferent to the size of what was happening in the truck on the road running through them. Then she reached over and put her hand in his, the same way she had on the drive home in October. And he held it the same way, all the way, without calculating it. And she said, "The lighting was good in that photo." "By the way." "I know," he said. "You were laughing." "I laugh a lot when I'm happy," she said. "I've noticed," he said. "Is that okay?" He looked at her briefly. Just briefly, and then back at the road. "It's the best thing I've heard in 3 years," he said. She squeezed his hand. He drove. The mountains came up around them. They arrived at the resort at 11. And the lobby was the same lobby, the same stone and warm light, and the specific mountain air. And Olivia walked in beside him and stopped just inside the door and looked around at the place where she had been scared, and then brave, and then honest, and then changed. The front desk had a different person working, young and efficient with the same practiced smile. Daniel gave his name. The reservation came up. The young man typed something, looked at the screen, and said, "Mr. Carter, I have you in a king room. Is that correct?" Olivia made a sound beside him. Small, barely audible, somewhere between a laugh and something that wasn't. "That's correct," Daniel said. The key cards came in their paper envelope. He took them. He looked at Olivia. She was looking at him with an expression that had started as the small private smile and expanded into something larger, something that had no practiced version, something that was just hers, entirely hers, unguarded, and full and certain. "One bed," she said. "One bed," he confirmed. "No pillow wall this time," she said. "No pillow wall," he agreed. She took one of the key cards from the envelope and looked at it and then at him. "You know," she said, "when I walked up to your desk 6 months ago and put my hands on the surface and said what I needed to say, I was terrified." "I know," he said. "But I did it anyway," she said. "You did," he said. "Because I decided the fear of not asking was bigger than the fear of asking," she said. "And I was right. And it got me here." She looked at the key card and then back at him. "To a hotel room with one bed that I am not afraid of at all." He reached over and tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear, the way he'd been wanting to do since approximately a fireplace on Friday night of the previous October. In that specific unhurried way, because the unhurried thing was who he was and he had stopped apologizing for it. I had the photo for 8 months, he said. I know, she said. Before the retreat. Before the fake anything. I had the photo because you were laughing, and the lighting was good, and I couldn't bring myself to delete it. She looked at him. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been meaning to say it properly, he said. Not in a truck. Not as a fun fact. Properly. He held her eyes. I had the photo because even then, even before I'd said a word about any of it, something in me already knew. She took a breath. Let it out slow. Knew what? That you were the one, he said. Simple. Plain. The way he said things when they were the most true. Not the one I expected. Not the one I planned for. The one that was already true before I'd found the words for it. The lobby moved around them. The mountain air came through the doors. Somewhere nearby, someone was having a perfectly ordinary Saturday. Olivia put her hand flat on his chest, her palm over his heart, and felt it beating the way she had on that first night in the room with the fire and the one bed and the pillow wall that neither of them had needed. You're not going to be easy, she said. You're going to be steady and contained, and you're going to solve things before I've finished being upset about them. And I'm going to have to tell you to just sit with me sometimes. I know, he said. I'm working on it. And I'm going to be loud in rooms sometimes and take up space, and need you to mean it when you say it's okay. It's always okay, he said. And Lily is going to love the dog more than both of us, she said. That's already decided, he said. And my mother is going to tell you that I'm a lot, she said. Within the first 20 minutes of meeting you. I'll tell her she's wrong, he said. She won't believe you. I'll tell her every time I see her until she does, he said. I'm very patient, she laughed. The real one? The private one. The one that was also partly his now. The one that escaped before it was invited and landed in the specific way that things land when they're home. She held his eyes and he held hers, and everything that had started with her hands flat on his desk and a question that cost her something was right here. In this lobby, in this moment, complete and open and entirely. Undeniably real. She took his hand, he held it. They walked toward the elevator. And the mountain was outside, and the room was upstairs. And the life they were building together was ahead of them. Large and unfinished and full of cardboard cities and crayon dogs and lemon poppy seed muffins and Wednesday dinners and Saturday morning calls and all the ordinary extraordinary weight of two people who had been carrying things alone for too long and had finally, deliberately, irreversibly, chosen to carry them together. And this time, when the elevator opened and they walked down the hall and the key card met the lock and the light clicked green, neither of them looked at the bed the way they had 6 months ago. Stunned and uncertain and careful, they walked in. They were home.